Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the very tragic and awful case of Sophie Lionnet. This case was suggested by Julia, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and of course if you have any more, please do let me know. Like I said, I've got lots of them. It's hard for me to try and get around to them all, but I try my best. Obviously I prioritise like my Patreon suggestions and things like that. But again, if you've suggested one that's been like a while ago, please just remind me, because yeah, it's hard to keep on top of them all. So, and that's basically all I do. Like, most of the cases I do are suggested. So yeah, as you can tell, I get quite a lot of them. Anyway, ramble over. Let's jump into this case. Sophie Lionnet was born on the 7th of January in 1996 to parents Catherine Delusion and Patrick Lionnet. This was in the town of Troyes in northeast France. I'm just going to put in an apology here. I am useless with pronunciations. Anyone that follows the channel will know that, and I'm deeply sorry that I get all of these names wrong, but I probably will do because they're French. I have no idea how to pronounce them. So there you go. Yeah, I'm just going to get them all wrong. So I'm sorry about that. Now, at some point, her parents did sadly split up, get divorced, and her mother found another partner who would become Sophie's stepfather. She married Stefan Del Vallone. Again, apologies if I've said the name wrong. And obviously he became a stepfather, although she was still very close to both parents. Well, all parents. Sophie was a lovely woman. She always had this warm smile. She had these beautiful green eyes. She was quite quiet and gentle, you know, in like her nature. She was kind of reserved, and some people actually said that she was a little bit naive too, which you'll probably see during this case. Well, you'll definitely see that during this case, sadly. She had this passion for animals though, and she had, even more so than animals, a sort of just an absolute raw love for children, and that is what she wanted to do when she was like as a job. That is what she wanted to do. She wanted to be around children and just work with them generally. That's what she'd always dreamed of. She loved music as well. Growing up, she adored music. She loved playing the guitar. She enjoyed reading books, and also ice skating was something she loved to do. Catherine actually described Sophie as a person that really hated like the injustices of the world. She hated bullying. She hated animal cruelty, and she was very passionate about preventing that, which is just such an amazing cause in my eyes. You know, I absolutely adore animals myself, and just animal cruelty and all that is just horrendous. So it's like something of my own as well that I'm very passionate about that as well. So I completely understand like where she's coming from in that one. So again, going back to the children, after she actually finished school, she completed like a vocational course in childcare, because like I said, that was what she wanted to do as a job. And then she was offered sort of a job that she felt like she couldn't refuse. Obviously, I'm not saying she couldn't refuse, she could, but it was to be an au pair in London. Now, an au pair is actually kind of like a nanny or a babysitter. So she'd have to move from France to go to London, but it would get her the experience that she needed or wanted to be around children. She would literally be living in somebody else's home, like a family's home, and looking after their kids. And in return, they would give her like a room, I don't know, maybe food on the table, pay her a little bit of money, and it would just get her that experience, and it was perfect for her. So what she did is she actually went down and spent some time with the family. I believe like 2 weeks as like a trial. Everyone got on really well. She loved the kids loved her, and so, you know, it was pretty much set after that. She figured it would be a great opportunity for her to learn English as well. And even though she was a little apprehensive about it, who wouldn't be, because she's literally moving in with someone else's family. And I mean, most of the time, your own family don't get on. Not most of the time, but actual family members can argue and not get on, and horrific things can happen. So, of course, you're going to be apprehensive moving into somebody else's home with somebody else's family. But like I said, the trial kind of really set her in a good mindset for it as well, because it worked, and she seemed to fit in really well, and everything was perfect. So, why not go for it? So the family she ended up being paired with was a woman who was 34 years old called Sabrina Coudier. She was born in 1983, and her partner, the same, who was known as Sam Medoni. He was 40 years old, born in 1978. They were both French nationals, living in Wimbledon Park in Southfields, which is a district of London. And the couple had 2 children. One was fathered by her ex-boyfriend, who was called Mark Walton. He will come into play later on. And that was just the family that she'd been paired with and spent some time with and felt everything was alright. However, those people around, like what Sophie wouldn't have known, some of the people around the family actually described them as a bit antisocial, sometimes rude and inconsiderate to others, and that sometimes they wouldn't pay the rent on time. But she said it was said that Sabrina always looked like glamorous, always in these fancy clothes, and looked really, really nice all the time. Now, obviously, just because other people think that about them doesn't mean that, you know, Sophie will ever see that side to them, kind of thing. So, well, I mean, she saw a different side to them, certainly, but we'll get more into that as we go through. 2015 was when she went on this trial, and then the next year, sort of January 2016, is when she finally moved over to London to live with the family. It was shortly after her 20th birthday, and she was really excited about it, but obviously very nervous too. The family had like a 2-bed flat kind of place, house thing, with a garden. And obviously with them only having 2 rooms, it meant that Sophie would have to stay in the room with the boys. And I believe they were 4 and 8 at the time. For the first few months that Sophie was there, everything was perfect. You know, she had a brilliant time. The boys loved her. She loved them. Everything went swimmingly. Like it should have done. Like it should have done the entire time. She often kept in touch with her parents, and she would tell them how she was having a fantastic time, how it brought her so much joy, how she was just literally loving life over there. She would also say how she got on with Sabrina. You know, they would have coffee together, they would have these long chats together. She would invite her to places to come and chat and things like that, and even gave her a makeover once as well. So the relationship with the parents seemed to be good and getting on well with them, as well as the boys. The problem was that it didn't last very long. Like I said, a few months, super happy. She would often be seen around town in the shops by local people, obviously. And she was happy. But then that started to change. People who were seeing Sophie all happy and jolly started to notice that she was suddenly not so happy and jolly. She was very down and very sad and just looked not her usual self that they were used to. And what it actually boiled down to was that Sabrina had become obsessed with her ex, Mark. Now, I believe he was an original member of a boy band, like the Boyzone or something like that, but then they got rid of him early stages. But he ended up having this successful music career. He started dating Sabrina, so he was quite a wealthy guy by all accounts. Started dating Sabrina. They had like a relationship for a while, but I believe it wasn't that great, and he said that she would just sort of get really angry and go off the rails, you know, over nothing. So they ended up splitting up, and for a time Mark actually paid her like her rent or whatever it was for the flat, and he paid that for a good few months, but then he stopped. And this is when Sabrina was not happy. She began getting like an obsession with him, accusing him of all sorts of things, derogatory things, basically trying to, I don't know, like end his career or end his reputation or something along those lines. Like, because he stopped paying for her, maybe, that she felt like he didn't deserve having a career anymore. I don't know. I don't know what her thought process was. But she literally got obsessed. She would send letters to him. She would claim that he did all these things when he didn't. Honestly, I don't think anybody really believed her. The police got involved and literally served her with a restraining order. That's how much she wasn't believed. She ended up filing like 30 reports trying to get him a bad reputation. That's how bad it got. And she became delusional about him. She really did, because she started thinking that he was trying to infiltrate her family and harm her family. And then she started to include Sophie in those delusions too, which is where it all went downhill for Sophie. Because bearing in mind, Sophie had never even met Mark. She didn't have a clue who he was. She was in no way collaborating with this man. But this is what Sabrina delusionally was believing. And to the point where she would actually interrogate Sophie. She would full on do an interrogation of Sophie, trying to get her to admit that she was collaborating with Mark. And of course, Sophie denied it, because guess what? She wasn't. It wasn't true. She's not going to lie about it. It wasn't factual. So she denied it all. But then I guess that made it even worse for Sabrina, because Sabrina, I don't know whether she really like was that delusional that she actually fully believed it. Well, she must have been, surely. So if she's believing that it's true and she just wants her to admit it, but Sophie's not going to admit something that isn't correct. So there you go. This is why it escalated and got even worse. And I'm not saying that Sophie should have admitted it, because she didn't do it. But you know what I mean? It's just awful what happened. It really is. Not only did Sabrina have these delusions about Sophie and Mark, so did Sam. He started joining in with them as well. It's like, I don't know. I just don't know. Shared delusions, I guess. It was said later on that, you know, after all this happened, that the couple actually suffered from this rare psychological disorder called folie à deux. Again, sorry if I've said that wrong, I most certainly have. Or duopsychosis, and it literally translates, the French version of it translates to madness for two. They would sometimes share hallucinations. That's how bad it got, and it's much like the case with Fred and Rosemary West. It was thought that they also suffered from the same thing. And the Moore's murderers too. Now we jump to April of 2017, and Catherine, Sophie's mother, has noticed that something is really wrong with her daughter. She would often speak to her on the phone. Like I said, she kept in regular contact, and she noticed that her daughter started to sound really fed up, really unhappy, and she was like wondering what she could do to help. She ended up saying to her mum that she wanted to come home ASAP, basically. So what her mum did was she transferred her the money to her bank, basically so she could buy a plane ticket to come home. But then she actually gets a call off who basically says that she ain't leaving. She claimed that Sophie stole a diamond ring from her, and that she would not be leaving until she got that back, which just was pretty much just an excuse, really. They really did keep her under their control completely. By August of 2017, Catherine said that Sophie sounded disorientated. At that point, little did her mother know that she was being beaten, so she was still being interrogated regularly, which they recorded, by the way. She was being beaten, she was being abused. They were not letting her eat, so she was very malnutritioned, which obviously as a result of that, she was very thin. The final days, 12 days in fact, before she lost her life, before she was murdered by these horrible people, she wasn't even allowed to leave the flat at all. Like, at all. I believe, like, coercive control and things, people say, like, how do they do it? How do these people manage to keep someone under their control? And don't forget that Sophie was described by even her own family as a very naive person who was very shy and sort of inverted. So, I don't know. They just managed to bully her and indoctrinate her, and they were awful to her. And they managed to keep her under control, their control, sadly. She tried to get out, like I said, but then she just called her mother. And what I did actually read is when the police searched her home, obviously this is skipping ahead a bit, but they searched her home, they couldn't find a passport. So they really do believe that these people burnt her passport. And that was a way of controlling her. She's not going to be able to get back home without a passport, unless she let her mum know of the circumstances and they managed to get her out, you know what I mean? But as for her just going to an airport and buying a plane ticket, it wasn't going to happen because she ain't getting anywhere without a passport. So that's how much control they had over her. They just took away so many things. Then on the 20th of September 2017, firefighters were called to Sabrina's household. There was this big fire that was getting out of control. Neighbours were worried about it because it was very close to the house, seemingly bellowing all the smoke and getting bigger and bigger. This fire absolutely stank as well, so, you know, we're impressed by it. So anyway, firefighters attend and they go in, and Sabrina and Sam are just cooking, stood very close to this barbecue, and they're cooking chicken on, not barbecue, they stood very close to the fire, and they've got like a little barbecue where they're cooking chicken. And the firefighters come in and are like, well, what's going on? They decide that they're going to put the fire out because it is crazy, it's going wild, and obviously they don't want it to get fully out of control, so they start putting out the fire. As they begin putting out the fire and end up sort of, you know, when they check over the ashes to make sure that there's no embers, it's not going to reset a light, yada yada yada, well, they start finding some strange stuff, you see, because they find like a pair of glasses that have melted. They find bits of clothes, and they ask Sam, like, what was you burning? Because obviously he could have just been burning some old garbage like clothes, whatever, he could have been burning that. So he says that he had a lamb carcass that he cut up and put on the fire, which probably is what the smell was, kind of thing. Well, that was funny because then they ended up finding a human nose, which obviously does not accompany a sheep's carcass. As they carried on looking through the ashes, they found jewellery. I believe they found bits of fingers and things like that. As you can probably tell, they weren't burning the sheep. They were burning 21-year-old Sophie Lionet's body. The pair were arrested straight away on suspicion of murder. Her body was so badly burnt that they couldn't figure out cause of death. They couldn't even sort of fully document the full extent of her injuries. They did find, obviously, some injuries. They found that she had a fractured jawbone. This was before she was put onto the fire as well, so it happened previous. A fractured sternum and 5 broken ribs. And I mean, a fractured sternum, your chest bone, your sternum is a very tough bone. So what did they do to her to actually get to fracture that? That's kind of crazy. They also found that her lungs were inflated, which obviously coincides with drowning, so they assume that potentially she may have drowned. It wasn't even confirmed that the body was actually Sophie's until the 3rd of October, like 3 weeks later. No, 2 weeks later, sorry. After the DNA test finally came back. Because like I said, there was just nothing left. And then obviously they searched the home. They looked for her passport, as I've already mentioned. They couldn't find that, so she was just fully under their control, sadly. They both admitted to burning the body, both being present when the body was being burnt, but none of them admitted to the murder of her, basically. Sam pretty much was the first one who it was put on. He basically said that he was interrogating her. I think he punched her in the face, which knocked her out, and then she drowned. And at that point, this is the first story he said, Sabrina was sort of not even there, like asleep or something. But then he found out that Sabrina was trying to pin it all on him, and so he changed. I think at first he was probably trying to protect her. But then when he figured that she weren't even trying to do the same for him, or at least taking part of the blame or anything, she was just trying to pin it all on him, that, like, he was mad at that. So he decided to tell the truth. Well, who knows if this is the truth, because it was very much he said, she said. Basically, he said she did it, and then she said he did it. So I don't actually think that we know who fully did it, because everyone claims that it's someone else. But he basically said that he was asleep, and then he heard Sabrina saying, "What have I done? What have I done?" So he then goes into the bathroom, and he finds Sophie there, deceased, with Sabrina there. They both basically told that story, kind of. They agreed on one thing though. They tried CPR, which didn't work, and then they stuffed her in a suitcase and put her in like the garage for a bit, for like 3 days before they decided that they were going to burn her body. They went to trial, and as part of the evidence, they had taken, like I said, they took tapes of this interrogation. So those were all played, which is very sad and awful. And there was one video taken on the day of her death, which was the 18th of September 2017. They basically showed her confessing. She was so thin as well, so I'll put a picture up. As you can see, she's very malnutritioned. She looks so thin and just like she's given up at that point. And it's so heartbreaking to see that photo of her, because that was the last sort of image taken from that video before, and she died not long after that. But she confessed to everything that they've been trying to badger out of her all that time. I don't know whether she didn't finally give up, or she was that malnutritioned and whatnot. She believed that she'd done it, actually believed it herself. No idea. Or whether she thought that they would stop if she confessed. But they didn't, I guess, because then they ended up killing her. But it's just really heartbreaking to see that, because she really looked like she'd given up at that point. And I mean, who can blame her? Sabrina and Sam were both sentenced to 30 years in prison. Well, they got life sentences, but like a minimum of 30 years, which, thank God, I hope those two never get out, because I don't know, the delusions that they shared, the torture that they put her through is just so horrific. My heart goes out to her family, who sent her, well, they didn't send her, but she was just looking to get some experience, learn a bit of English, have a bit of a different culture swap. Just, I don't know. And she was murdered by these horrible people. It's so sad. But yeah, that is the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed the video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Sophie Lionnet. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!